never ignore patterns or circles, because that would let you know or see the place you need to work on, or see the areas you need to work on to improve yourself. So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're just saying me hi, my name is SINDYAKPOLO. Good to have you here. You're most definitely welcome. Today, just like you clicked on the title and the thumbnail, today I'm going to be talking about generational patterns or circle. And I think when people hear the word generational patterns or generational circle, they always think the negative. But what if I told you that generation patterns or generational circles can also mean positive and negative, and it also depends on the side that reflects on you mostly. And for this video, I'm going to be talking about the negatives, because sometimes we tend to ignore most of these patterns or most of these things, and these are traits that have been in us, sometimes like in our character, sometimes like the way we behave, sometimes the way we talk, the way we perceive things, the way we see things, and the way we interact with people as well. Is sometimes some of these things are things that we've grown so used to. And the thing with generational patterns or circle, it starts growing in us as children. So it did not start with our parents, it started with our grandparents, our great-grandparents and the likes. It's more of something that is our generation. All right, so just a warning guys, so this topic can be a little triggering, but I hope this video would help 1 or 2 persons out there by unlocking or seeing or taking note of some of these patterns or circles in their family and start working on it, especially the negative side. So we are talking about the negative, so you don't dwell so much on the negative side or the negative aspect patterns that occur in your family or in your family history. I feel like when it comes to generational patterns or circles, people would like to avoid the negative side of it, and they don't want to look at it and do much inner work. And there's one thing with me that I've grown so used to is to never ignore patterns or circles, because that would let you know or see the place you need to work on, or see the areas you need to work on to improve yourself. And yes, generational patterns can also range from both negative and positives. Like, let's say for example, you're from a wealthy family and the wealth passed on from generations to generations. The same it is with negative feeling or negative patterns that passes from generations to generations. With these patterns or with these circles, it is time to stop some of these patterns that are not helping, especially if they are holding us back to not doing some things. So I'm going to be reading in the meaning of generational patterns or circle, just a brief of what it means. Sorry, I'm going to be looking over on my note because I wrote down some points so I don't forget. What does generational patterns or circle means? Generational patterns or circle, they are personality traits or patterns that have been passed from parents to children or parents to child, and sometimes they are positive or negative, but most times the negative draws more attention. When you notice that you have some patterns or some circles from your family. Now, what do I mean by negative patterns? Negative patterns can range from how you see the environment. Let's say for example, you've been trained to believe that nothing good would come out from something, and so you would believe that this particular thing, let's say for example, you have a job, and in your mindset you've been trained that because you're working in 9 to 5, you can never become a millionaire because you have a 9 to 5, or because you're dependent, or because you're being paid salary, you can never become a millionaire, or you can never become wealthy. Let's use that for example. Because you've been trained to believing that, even when you grow up as adults, you believe that, and you try to train your children to thinking that way, thereby causing or making your children not to work in 9 to 5, or not to work for someone else, or to believing that they should start to set up their own business. And now I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but because you've passed down a certain trait to your child would believe that, oh, when I grow up, because my parent has said this thing, therefore all 9 to 5ers are not wealthy people, or all 9 to 5ers cannot be wealthy. And sometimes you might not even tell your child about those things, because as children, they understand, they notice these patterns from parents, and when they note or see these patterns, it becomes built in their head. So they believe that because I saw my parents doing this thing, I think this is how the world is, or this is how I'm supposed to do this thing. You know, for example, when you teach a child how to cook, or you train a child, or you teach a child not to do, maybe the child did something bad and you told the child not to do that, because of the singular reason you've told the child not to do that is a bad thing. Do you think the child will still do that? No, the child will not do that, because it is already ringed or create an awareness into the child's mind that if I do this thing, is a bad thing. It's going to ring in the child's mind not to do that thing because of the negative result, or because of the result it would get, bad decisions. And that is also how generational patterns are passed on to. Sometimes we watch our parents do some certain things, or as parents has told us or taught us some certain things. Let's say, for example, to not liking some particular people, not associating with some particular people. And when you grow up, you get so used to that. And do you want to pass that same knowledge or that same traits to your children? Now that we've identified and talked about what generational patterns or generational circle is, now we're going to be talking about how to break the circle. And I know because you stumbled upon this video, it was for a reason. So you know those patterns and you are ready to break from that cycle so it doesn't continue from generation to generation. Now, how do you break the circle? So when it comes to breaking the circle, it is not easy, especially as adults, because these are something that becomes part of our lifestyle, and we've been trained and we've been nurtured to believing a certain thing or having to believe something. These are patterns, or these are traits that are in the family history. So with this, I understand that some people, they don't want to leave their family history, because sometimes some of these things are part of reminder to who our family is, or who we are as part of this family, or as members of this family. But what if I told you that you can break this negative circle or negative pattern, not to affecting your child or affecting the next generation, and still maintain the image or the identity of your family? Because you don't have to continuously dwell in the negative patterns or the negative circles from your family history or from your family. And for the singular reason you stumbled upon watching this video, it means that you're ready to break from that cycle. And it takes some level of self-awareness to determining or to knowing what the circles are, or what the circles is, or what these patterns is to break from. And to breaking the generational circles and patterns, it involves a certain level of shifting the behavioral response and communication, so it becomes part of our lifestyle, and we begin to adapt to that. Now, how do you break those circles or those patterns? First of all, recognize those patterns or identify your family beliefs. Now, what are your family beliefs? What are the things that you've been grown to believe in? What are the things you've been told to believe in? Let's say, for example, when growing up, you've been told, or maybe according to your environment or according to the style of environment you grew up in, you've been told that some certain people are not good, or some certain people are bad. When you grow up, even as adults, you begin to reflect that kind of character to believing that these certain people, they are not good people, or these certain people, they are not nice. And it becomes part of your lifestyle, and you start responding according to how you've been groomed and nurtured to believe in. And even when you meet those people, you believe that those people are not nice. What are your family beliefs, whether negative or positive? Try to identify what those beliefs are, and all you have to do to start identifying them is by listing them, or getting your note and your paper and start writing them. No matter how small they are, start writing them. And I know sometimes it can be a lot of work with doing this, but when you start getting to the root of those patterns, you can start tackling them. And how do you do that? You take note of those things. Let's say, for example, you're so used to believing that let me use rice, for example. We all know rice, right? Let's say, for example, you're so used to believing that rice is not good for your body. Do you go back to eat rice? No, because you've been used to knowing that rice is not good for your body. You won't go back to eating it. But when you identify and you know that rice is good for your body, because at some point you need carbohydrate, you need some certain nutrients of food, and rice gives a certain nutrient to your body, you start eating it. Thereby you have identified it, and that way you've tackled that problem. So what are the aspects or the areas of your life that have been nurtured based on your family beliefs? So you want to start by identifying those things and taking your note and paper and noting them down, both negative and positive. Start doing that, and you begin to notice the patterns, notice the circles or traits, or sometimes some of these traits are traits that you've noticed this in your parents' character, in your father's lineage, in your mother's lineage, and probably most of these things you don't have it. Sometimes you might not have it, but when you start noting a lot of these behaviors, you start to understand that you don't have this behavior, or you don't have this thing, and you notice that it's similar to what your sibling have, and it's similar to what other people around you they have. And with that, you begin to understand that these are things that have been passed on, or is within the family tree, or is within the family history. And by noting it, you have already identified those things, and now you also know how and where to start tackling the problem, or now start to solving the problem. When you start writing those things, you now know the root cause, and you now start working towards tackling that problem or tackling it. So the next one is to examine yourself, or to identify your triggers. Once you have already identified the root problem, now you want to start looking inwards. So what are those patterns? What are those traits that are in your family that you also have? It could be good, it could be bad, but you don't have to ignore those things, because sometimes we try to ignore most of these things or most of these patterns. Sometimes we ignore it because we're doing it for ourselves, but it is also good to do the inner work, so that way you identify and you know where the problem is and where to start working with it. When you can confront the feelings inside of you, you can start making progress towards breaking the circle. Now all you have to do is, again, write them down. You want to make sure that you're writing every detail and not ignoring any single detail. Those tiny little details that you feel they don't matter, they do. And all you have to do is identify it. So what are your fears? What are the things that excite you? What are the things that scare you? What are the things that you can't stand? What are the things that you don't like? List all of those things. What are the things you believe in? What are the things that you've been grown to believe in? What are the things you've been taught to believe in? What are the things you've been nurtured to believe in? Now, when you've already done the deep dive and you've done the inner work, now we're going to move to coping and adaptation patterns. So what are the ways you deal with things? Let's say, for example, when faced in an argument, or when an argument occurs, what do? Sometimes some people, they believe that when they are in a form of argument, the first thing that comes to mind is to throw the first punch, because they believed or they've seen their parents hitting each other. They are so used to that identity to believing that throwing the first punch gives you more like a defense, or creates more like a defense. But I'm here to tell you that all of those things are patterns or ways that we adapt or cope with things. It's based on what we've seen, based on what we know, based on what we've been nurtured to believe in. And also, let me use for example, when faced in an argument, what do? Sometimes some people in that case, when faced with an argument, they believe in not talking about it. They believe in walking out of it, or taking a walk, or whatever. And sometimes when you do a deep dive to checking where those responses come from, or where those patterns come from, you discover that probably it's from your family, or it's from your environment where you've been grown to believing that you don't talk about things that bother you, you don't talk about issues. All you have to do is let it go, take a walk, let it go, and believing that is all settled. But when you start identifying those things, you begin to understand that these are patterns that have been in your family and is also grown in you, or ingrown in you. When it comes to family conflict, you don't run away from it. All you have to do is to talk about it. Now, when you've identified your coping, adaptation, and patterns, what do? All you have to do is, if you can also have your family session or have a family session and you guys talk about it. And when you guys are talking about these patterns, don't just walk away. Talk about these things and look for a way to solving that problem or working together. Sometimes when you have a family gathering, what do? Do you guys just sit down and laugh and play and eat just because of the family time, or do you actually sit down to knowing the root cause of some problems or knowing the root cause of some identities and trying to work in to changing that identity or changing that belief or changing that pattern that would not fetch you something or fetch you something good? Because some families, they are so into believing some negative beliefs, some negative identities, some negative talks that passes on to children, and sometimes it's part of your family, and you don't have to run away from that family identity or that family pattern. All you have to do is to talk about it. And what if your family is not ready to talk about it? Allow them to have some time to talking about it, to understanding those things, because one, you can't change your parents, but you can also let them know that you've come to a certain level of awareness to believing and understanding that you no longer want to identify with some patterns or you no longer want to identify with some beliefs. All they have to do is to support you with your decision and to see a way to working with you to adjusting or making some necessary adjustments to those things. I know sometimes it might be hard, or it can be hard, especially when it comes to family patterns or generational patterns. Allow your family to come to the state or the level of awareness you are in. Sometimes these things takes a lot of time to process, and sometimes when you bring up these things that they are so used to believing in and maybe you want to make a change to it, they feel like they are losing some certain part of their identity or some certain part of them that they have believed in. So all you have to do is allow them to process it. Don't rush them, especially when it comes to talking with family, to coming to the state of awareness, to breaking free from those circles. I know sometimes it can be a lot, it can be hard, and in the event where they are not ready to break free from the circle, the easiest thing to do is, as long as you have identified yourself from the circle and you've chosen to break free from that circle, and you chose not to believe in that pattern or not to believe in that circle, now you've done the work for yourself. Now allow your parents or your family to do the work themselves. Now you can't hold their hand to believing or to deciding to breaking free from that pattern. It is a personal work, is a self work. You don't force people to do these things. You allow them to get to the level and the state to doing these things, because sometimes we know we can come from a certain family where it has to be one person's opinion or nothing, and when you impose an opinion on somebody or you impose your opinion or belief into somebody, you're still repeating or doing the exact same thing but in a different way. So don't put pressure to your family to believing what you believe immediately, or to joining you alongside to believing or to breaking the cycle immediately. These things take time. You don't just wake up today and say, I have chosen to break free from my family patterns or from my family circles or from a generational patterns, and then it all starts immediately. These things, they are habitual. So when you start doing habits or things that are making you not rely on those patterns or not to go back to doing those patterns, then you've done the work. It's not only by saying, but actually doing those habits that would make you not continuously or not continue doing those negative patterns or negative things. So yes, again, don't force your family, allow them to process and also start building to breaking free from those circles or that pattern. How do you cope when faced with things? So all you have to do is to understand your coping adaptation or coping mechanism, understand your coping patterns to things, and sometimes have a good session or a quick session with your family to understanding and knowing how to break free from those patterns or break free from those circles. Because believe you, sometimes those patterns are things that have been holding you back. All you have to do is to break free from those patterns. And yes, sometimes it can be hard. It is actually really difficult to breaking some patterns or some circles or some things that you've grown to believe in, especially as adults. Ask yourself this question: these patterns that you've identified, or these patterns that are in my family, are these what I want to pass on to my children, or are these what I want to pass on to my generation? If the answer is yes, then you can go on with it. But if the answer is no, then you have to start working on how to make the identity shift for the better. Now the next one is to remove or unlock the barrier or seek help. Sometimes when it comes to identifying these patterns, or sometimes when it comes to patterns or generational patterns, it can be hard when we talk about these things with family and with ourselves, and sometimes it might be helpful to seek help. And these are things that therapists would help you with, because with them it's easier to sometimes identify these patterns, because by talking or sharing your story helps to identify these things. Because with therapists, there can be the confidentiality of having or noting these things. So when you talk about these things, you start to unlock and begin to take note of these patterns, and you start to know the areas to work on and how to break free from these patterns. And yes, sometimes it can be hard when it comes to talking about your triggers, your pains, your family background, your family history, your family circle, your family patterns. But sometimes it's good to talk about these things so you know where and how to break free from some certain patterns that do not work with you, or that do not align with you. Because the truth is, we grow as individuals, and every time we grow and we evolve, we try to shift from a certain identity, or try to shift from a certain belief to believing something new. And yes, sometimes you can believe in something, and other times you can decide to change your thoughts. You are allowed to change your thoughts, and you're allowed to change your belief. And when it comes to growth and evolution, their identity shifts or their patterns, and as we evolve and grow, we shed off some certain areas and some certain things that don't work with us or don't align with us in the next stage or in the evolution process. And this is where the identity shift comes in, or the generational patterns comes in, breaking free from these patterns or breaking free from this circle, so you start to enjoy your evolutional phase. I know this was kind of triggering and hard to listen to at the same time, but sometimes it's good to talk about these things so that we know where to work on and how to break free from some certain patterns or some certain circles. And sometimes some of these videos are made to help us or to guide us through, but the actual person that needs to do this thing or start doing this thing to identifying the patterns and to breaking free from the pattern is you. And all you have to do is to do the inner work, identify the beliefs, identify the circle, identify the patterns, do the inner work, and start working towards breaking free from those circles, or start working towards breaking free from that pattern. Or you can also seek help by talking to a therapist or seeing a therapist that can help or guide you through doing these things, or doing the inner work, or doing the work. Sometimes we do these things subconsciously. We don't even know we are doing these things, and it just takes some level of self-awareness to understanding, to noting, and to seeing those patterns or seeing those things, and to identifying the areas that needs more work or needs work to be done on. But I hope this video would help 1 or 2% out there by unlocking or seeing or taking note of some of these patterns or circles in their family and start working on it, especially the negative side. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did create it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video or if you enjoy videos like this, let me also know in the comment section down below. Hit the subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed to my channel. Turn on your post notification bell so you don't miss out on my future uploads. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and check out my other videos to stay connected.